the group is beginning to assemble. They have already been prepared with the use of proper study materials for the film which is to be shown.
The room lights are dimmed, the projector is running. The classroom has become a setting for use of a very effective teaching tool, the classroom film.
So let's start with the so-called discovery and early history of America. The Land of Liberty from 1943 is a motion picture industry coordinated film. They put their resources together and they use clips from Hollywood films to create this multi-part view of U.S. history. It's a rare instance where the narrator blatantly cheers on the white man taking his new home. You will notice that films like these almost always see the North American continent as empty, virgin forest, a primeval, undeveloped wilderness waiting to be populated.
America, asleep through the ages. Vast primeval America, land of freedom and of hope. A new home for the white man in his age-old migration westward. For 150 years after landing at Jamestown and Plymouth, English colonists were building homes and organizing local governments. Stout-hearted pioneers moved out for the conquest of the continent and made it our inheritance. They fought side by side with British soldiers in wars against the French and Indians for the control of North America. The commerce of the sea brought wealth to merchants in spite of trade restrictions, which led to clashes at the ports. Denial of their cherished right to vote their own taxes strained the bonds with England to the breaking point. Royal governors were the instruments of this short-sighted policy.
Oh, milady, may I present Mr. James Madison and Mr. Thomas Jefferson? Both of these gentlemen are members of the Virginia Assembly.
Gentlemen, I welcome you to my home.
We welcome you to Virginia, milady.
And to the hearts of her people.
Oh, you overwhelm me. I must confess I hadn't expected to find such charming manners among the colonials.
We colonists have learned to call ourselves by another name. Americans. See, milady, both of these gentlemen are firm believers in the doctrine of equal rights.
A dangerous doctrine, as the people of Massachusetts have learned to their sorrow.
And dangerous to tyrants, my lord.
Tyrants, sir? Are you implying that His Majesty...
My implication is a friendly one, Your Excellency. A friendly warning.
My dear?
Is Colonel Mason here?
Yes, he here, right in the reception room, sir.
Is Colonel Mason here?
Yes, he here, right in the reception room, sir.
Next, from 1954, the Chamber of Commerce short animated film, It's Everybody's Business. Director John Sutherland actually worked for Disney on Bambi before starting his own company that created films that celebrated free market capitalism. Here's another example of empty America waiting for the Europeans to come in and do something with it.
It wasn't so long ago in the history of man's voyage toward a better world that ships were carrying eager passengers toward the shores of a new nation that was just in the building. Our forefathers were constructing the foundation of this nation by interlocking inseparably the blocks of our political and economic freedoms. way of life our forefathers established on this foundation of freedoms drew people from the far corners of the earth. And all those who set foot on these shores had the opportunity to build a better life for themselves. In the nick of time, an enterprising chap showed up with the raw materials to make hats. And before long, Jonathan was open for business. In the future of our country, waves of destructive forces will continue to batter against our foundation. When any force weakens the interlocked blocks of our political and economic freedoms, as good citizens, we must be quick to use the tools our Constitution gives us and repair any cracks that may appear. As long as we keep the foundation of our business system strong, we shall be able to maintain and improve the way of life our forefathers conceived and established. A way of life which gave everyone who came to this country the chance to progress according to his ability and enterprise. Like the youth of yesterday, the young people of today deserve the same opportunity to earn success and accomplishment. And on this foundation of freedoms, continue to build a better life for themselves and their fellow man in the world of tomorrow.
Did you know that the founders of America, when they came here from England seeking freedom and a better way of life, established first a communal or collectivist economic system? They did, both at Jamestown and at Plymouth Rock. Let's look in a moment on the Plymouth colony. So when the communal or collectivist system carried them toward starvation, the governmental and religious leaders together proposed the establishment of the basic law of private property and the fundamental principle of self-reliance. Every able-bodied man was to become responsible for his family. The community-owned or government-owned farmlands and pastures would be parceled out for private ownership. People would exchange goods and services among themselves, according to their abilities and desires. The industrious and the lazy alike would have to work or would suffer a self-inflicted penalty.
I very much admire these ridiculous wigs, as I happen to have a collection of ridiculous wigs.
From this time forth, the people possessed their own property. Thus at Plymouth was established this fundamental characteristic of American philosophy, and self-reliance became the rule. The housewife came out of her kitchen, and the children gave up some of their playtime to work in the fields, so the family could produce more and have more and live better. The fruit of their labor was theirs. No wonder they were willing to work.
There's a fish. That's funny. I wonder how the Pilgrims learned how to plant a fish with their corn. And how did they learn about corn? And how did they avoid starving? You won't see any indigenous Americans in this film. Speaking of wigs, my nominee for the most ridiculous wigs used in any film I reviewed are these that appear in a Defense Department film about the U.S. Constitution. Given their current trillion-dollar budget, I'm sure this could never happen today.
Over this ocean, 1607 Jamestown, 1620 Plymouth Rock, here was America, the sea, the sky, the virgin continent. We came in search of freedom, facing unknown dangers rather than bend the knee or bow to tyranny. We came to these fertile fields, thick forests and great rivers to find freedom. And we built a nation of farms and factories, towns and cities. We came for more than the country. We came because of an idea bigger than the country. Without the idea, the country might have remained a wilderness. Without the country, the idea might have remained only a dream. We took an axe, and out of the native oak and pine, we built a church, a watchtower, a log cabin. We cleared a field, and there a colony of free citizens prospered and grew. We carved new states out of the green wilderness: Virginia, Massachusetts, Rhode Island, Carolina. 13 colonies spread north, south, east, and west. The dream took substance and the idea took form, but then came the first threat to that idea. It began in Boston and spread to Lexington and Concord. The shots heard round the world. The cause was oppression. The Stamp Act.
Oh, look, they did include Indians after all. Whoops, nope. That's the Boston Tea Party. Hooligan whites dressed as Indians. They were probably Antifa.
The intolerable acts, the denial of representation, tyranny. We were outraged by England's disregard of the human rights of our own citizens, and we resolved to fight.
By war and purchase, we had rounded out our southern border and held the territory from Texas to the Golden Gate.
To this was added, by peaceful negotiation, the Oregon country on the north, so long a subject of dispute.
Thus, the westward movement of the white races, begun centuries ago, fulfilled its destiny in the reaches that lay beyond the Mississippi.
The unquenchable vision was at last fulfilled, of a land of liberty that stretched shining sea. Thus, westward, ever westward, the course of empire took its way.
This next film wins the prize for Most Annoying Theme Song. I think you'll agree.
In nearly 200 years since the colonies began, there had been settled only a narrow strip along the coast. The new United States was a long, thin country with an unplumbed continent at her back. But then that driving urge came welling up. In the heady air of freedom, it could not be contained.
I come from Alabama with a banjo on my knee.
I kind of imagine that this is the type of film that former CNN commentator and Senator Rick Santorum watched when he was growing up. Here's what he said about Native Americans.
We came here and created a blank slate. We birthed a nation from nothing. I mean, there was nothing here. I mean, yes, we have Native Americans, but candidly, that there isn't much Native American culture in American culture.
I'm going to California, my true love courtesy.
I sing as I wander along on the lonely road.
Gone are the dark days of the war between the states. Gone too are the rumbling wagon wheels on the old pioneer trails. Today, other wheels are rolling on the superhighways of modern America. This is a story of America and some of the people along the way.
Say, aren't you Tex Ritter, the movie cowboy?
That's my brand.
I saw you get on at Laramie.
I've been on personal appearances, Denver and places.
I wish I could hear you in person. Well, could you?
Well, now, maybe I could. Just one short one. Did you ever hear the legend of the Alamo?
I don't know.
Did you ever hear of Davy Crockett?
Oh, sure.
Well, this song here is about Davy and the Alamo. Now, you try to imagine that you're in San Antonio, Texas, while I sing about it.
Alamo and the the stubborn band that stood in the path of invasion. 180 were challenged by Travis to die. By the line that he drew with his sword when the battle was nigh. And young Davy Crockett was first to cross over with a gallantry fierce in his eye. For God and for freedom, a man more than willing to die. Hi, yip, Santa Ana, we're killing your soldiers below. That men, wherever they go, will remember the Alamo. Hi, yip, Santa Ana, we're killing your soldiers below. That men, wherever they go, will remember the Alamo.
So I grew up believing that the men fighting in the Alamo were heroes fighting for liberty. I watched the John Wayne movie at the time, and we used to play the Alamo. However, I recently read this book, Forget the Alamo, The Rise and Fall of an American Myth. I learned that many of the defenders inside the Alamo in 1836 were actually illegal immigrants to Mexico and were insurrectionists fighting for an independent slave state because slavery had been banned in Mexico. It's actually a very complicated story involving native tribes and many competing forces. But don't take my word for it. Check out the book.
Texas won its independence after a long and bloody struggle, during which a band of 187 Americans met death and won enduring fame at the Alamo.
Coronet Instructional Films were one of the most prolific producers of classroom films. This 1950 film does not ignore slavery at all, but given the syrupy music and the gentle narration, you might come away from this believing the slaves were happy. There's no indication of the horrors of whippings, sexual assault, and families forever divided by slave sales.
If you've ever been in one of our southern states, you may have taken a sightseeing trip just as this family. A trip to see one of the plantation homes that were built before the Civil War. This beautiful mansion is one of many homesteads that were once the residences of southern planters. These homes were centers of plantation life. Inside the mansion, we can get some idea of the luxuries that a wealthy plantation family enjoyed. The home was often beautifully furnished. Planters imported fine household goods from England. These things represent part of the wealth that came from products grown on the plantation. Here is a map that explains how this plantation was organized. It was almost a little community by itself. Most of the sections of land were devoted to one crop, such as cotton. Other sections contained orchards, vegetable gardens, and pastures, the source of food for the people and the work animals. The buildings included the planter's home, a mill, workshops, and a row of small cabins for the slaves, who did almost all the work. We can still find remnants of some of these things on old plantations. These small houses were for the slaves who worked on the plantation. The planter and his slaves were part of an unusual class system. The sharp division of people into two main groups, the owners and the slaves, left a lasting influence on the society of the South. What was that society like? For the plantation owner and his family, it was an aristocratic kind of society. Gentle manners, courtesy, hospitality. Many of the ideas that we still associate with the people of the South came from the days when plantation life was in full flower. This, then, was the social organization of the plantation. The aristocratic class of the landowners, who had wealth and privileges, and the laboring class of the slaves, who had little wealth and few privileges.
Let's all go to the lobby. Let's all go to the lobby. Let's all go to the lobby to get ourselves a treat.
Delicious things to eat.
The popcorn can't be beat. The sparkling drinks are just dandy. The chocolate bars and the candy. So let's all go to the lobby to get ourselves a treat. Let's all go to the lobby to get ourselves a treat.
So now I'd like to move on to a topic of special interest to me. Several years ago, my wife and I produced a 4-part documentary about the Constitution called Confounding Father, A Contrarian View of the U.S. Constitution. The series looks at the Constitution from the point of view of the people who opposed it in 1787 and 88. We use clips from educational films throughout that documentary to show how the Constitution and the Constitutional Convention had traditionally been taught, and those films almost universally ignored slavery. So here's some of those clips and then a segment from our film with scholars talking about how important slavery really was at the Constitutional Convention and why it cannot be ignored.
In the face of quarrels at home and threats abroad, congressmen were unable to act.
Military force, sir. Shays and his outlaws should be put down by military force.
A standing army is a threat to liberty. How easy for ambitious men to turn it against the states and the people.
Oh, sir, you fear strong government too much. If the ills of these days are not soon remedied, we'll have no government.
At a place called Independence Hall, a convention had been in session for many months, attended by delegates representing the various colonies. Whatever they were doing, it seemed important. Some thought this convention was a waste of time, and others were unconcerned. Still, it was the subject of much discussion. Basically, all the delegates wanted the same thing: one nation with a strong central government. Now they realized that in order to create this, they would have to make concessions and compromises on the controversial issues.
Not everybody is happy with all of the compromises that they have made. Slavery is certainly one of those issues that they are going to debate here, and will divide them just as it divides the rest of the country for decades to come.
On the very first day of substantive debate, when Edmund Randolph, the governor of Virginia, introduces what's known as the Virginia Plan says representation should be based on population, and immediately somebody suggests that they put the word free in front of population, and that leads to a debate. And they decide not to debate that any further that day. They debate how you count slaves for representation over and over and over again. There are long debates over slavery. There are vitriolic debates. There are nasty debates over slavery.
When the textbooks talk about the Constitutional Convention, they do tend to focus on all of the disagreements and then the compromises that resolve those disagreements. And they tend to celebrate those compromises. Part of me says, well, that's a good idea. Let's teach kids to get along and not be fighting on the playground and all that. But some of those compromises are really ugly compromises, like the compromise that continued the slave trade for another 20 years and also allowed the Southerners to go up into the North and force the local authorities to help them recover their slaves when they ran away. That's a compromise in the less pleasant sense of the word compromise.
What I find fascinating about the Fugitive Slave Clause in the U.S. Constitution is that most people don't know that there's a Fugitive Slave Clause in the U.S. Constitution. And that the same clause that speaks to the extradition of suspects from one state into another state in one paragraph. The next paragraph speaks to the extradition of human beings who have escaped slavery from one state to another state. So the compromise within the U.S. Constitution in 1787 was that the slaveholders who were in the room did not want to see their property diminished. There would be the ending of the slave trade in 1808, but slavery itself would continue as a business because they had invested so much in it.
What the framers could do and did do was to limit slave importation to 20 years and to use circumlocution so that the Constitution does not include the word slave or slavery. What they couldn't do, and they've been criticized for this, and I think unfairly, is to have eliminated slavery. Then there's no union. No union, well, you know, what does that do? That doesn't help.
It was not inevitable. To be sure, the Constitution would not have abolished slavery. But I believe that the multiple protections for slavery were not foreordained. Madison was so obsessed with winning proportional representation in both branches in Congress that he was willing to sacrifice the future of nearly 750,000 people held as property, about 20% of the population of the United States. And without the 3/5 clause and the rise of the Southern slave power in national politics, our entire national history would be different. In the 1790s, the slave states gained 10 or 11 extra seats because of this compromise. In the 1830s, they had 24 additional seats because of this compromise.
In the debate over how to choose the president, James Madison says the fittest thing, that is the most appropriate thing, would be for the people to elect the president. And then he says, but if that happens, our Negroes won't count. And of course, what he means by our Negroes won't count is the slaves aren't going to vote. Virginia is the largest state in the country by population, but 40% of the population are slaves. And so if you can't fold the slaves into the election of the president, Virginia won't get to elect its presidents. So you get the Electoral College, which is made up by giving electors based on the number of representatives in Congress you have, and the number of representatives in Congress is based on the 3/5 clause. And so when you get to, say, the crucial presidential election of 1800, Jefferson is elected president because of the electors created by the 3/5 clause. If there had been no slaves counted for purposes of representation, Jefferson would not have been elected president in 1800. And it's clear, it's open. Madison says it. People say it all the time.
Oh, good captain, this morning.
And the rationalization for slavery continuing and for the compromise to allow slavery to continue is based on what we're still dealing with today, which is a nation of disparate backgrounds and religions and beliefs brought together in a way that coalesces around whiteness. And one way for whiteness to actually have a reality to it is to have blackness, is to have people of color, is to have the other. And so the xenophobia has been a part of the beginning of this nation.
Let's hurry on to 1787. I just returned from France. France. 1787. That was a year in which a national government based on the popular will was at last founded, and a constitution written.
Sadly, even as late as 1976, the National Park Service film, directed by Hollywood legend John Huston, talks about the Declaration of Independence and then a little bit about the Constitution, but it never mentions slavery. Of course, I truly hope the National Park Service would never do that now. However, this film is still shown at their visitor center.
A gathering of haunted houses where the Declaration and the Constitution are always being written, peopled with ghosts and voices of ghosts. And the old cracked bell echoes liberty. Tom Paine said, "We have the power to begin the world anew." You have a republic, if you can keep it. Learning to read is more than just that. A man must learn to recognize lies, know the danger of the half-truth. A citizen must be able to speak in his own fashion. The foundation of national debate on great issues is built stone by stone in the classroom. History is freedom's weapon, fine minds speaking simple truths through the centuries, and sometimes even more important, the lament of tens of thousands dying in a gas chamber. The course of history and the way in which the course was changed, there is a relation between then and now.
Perhaps there's a connection between what the men of the Constitutional Convention achieved here and what all of you did last week when you elected George to represent you on the school council. How about it, George? Did the class give you the power to be their boss, or did they appoint you to speak for them?
George isn't our boss. We tell him what to do. We're still the boss, all of us.
The housewife taught in this class will know that free citizens must be free from fear. The injustice of the past can kindle the indignation of today.
The 8-hour workday ends and the men go home, mostly by trolley. Not many can afford to buy a car of their own yet. These men went home long ago, when the war between the states ended. But the hardy survivors, both blue and gray, still meet together once a year to renew old acquaintance. It's 1917, and they're camped at Vicksburg, Mississippi. What memories they must have. They have fought their war. While these raw recruits at Camp Custer in Michigan are being trained to fight another war. The call goes out and youth responds enthusiastically.
African American soldiers, or as they were called then, the colored troops, veterans of the Civil War, were most often not permitted to participate in these reunions. But you can see here when I slowed down the shot that maybe they're not veterans, but African Americans are serving the former Confederates at their reunion. The National Archives has a huge collection of U.S. Army Signal Corps films from World War I, and they recently had a very big grant to digitize them, and I think most of them are on their YouTube channel. However, as usual, this unfortunate film by the Army shows the training of, quote, colored troops. This is the type of insidious practice that was very common at the time. When blacks appear in film, they are made comedy relief, ignorant, or just imbeciles, but they are not treated as serious soldiers. Two soldiers know what's going on and are covering their faces here, refusing to participate.
New Jersey shares with New York pride in the Palisade Interstate Park across the Hudson from uptown Manhattan. Conservation Corps boys working here are quartered in comfortable barracks near Englewood, one of New York City's exclusive New Jersey suburbs.
You can see here that these white civilian Conservation Corps boys are serious and doing important work. Unfortunately, this same film showed African American CCC workers, and they're diminished and mocked by the government filmmakers.
Happy-go-lucky Negro boys comprise one of the groups of Conservation Corps workers in the Berlin area. And inevitably, when 2 or 3 of these are gathered together,
I wanted to share with you a counterpoint example from the World War II period. This film, The Negro Soldier, was made to help recruit blacks into the military. It's surprising when you watch this film immediately after watching all the ones I've been sharing with you because it tells a different story. It was co-written and narrated by a black screenwriter named Carlton Moss, and he actually plays the preacher who narrates the film.
Thank you, soldier. My prepared text today was to have been, "Make thy name be remembered in all generations." But I think I'm going to depart from my prepared sermon. While I was listening to the sergeant's solo, I kept looking up at our service flag. I was thinking of the men in service. I see some of them here this morning. Private Roberts, Sergeant Jackson, Lieutenant Carter, and
Private Parks, first class.
First class is right. I was over at the USO the other night, and I met somebody I hadn't seen in quite a long time. The last time I saw this man, well, one of my members treated me to a ticket to Yankee Stadium to see Joe Louis versus Max Smaley. In 1 minute and 49 seconds, an American fist won a victory. But it wasn't the final victory. No, that victory is going to take a little longer and a whole lot more American fists. Now, those two men that were matched in the ring that night are matched again. This time in a far greater arena and for much greater stakes. Max Smaley, a paratrooper in the Nazi army. Men turned into machines, challenging the world. Joe Louis, training for the fight of his life. This time it's a fight not between man and man, but between nation and nation. It's a fight for the real championship of the world, to determine which way of life shall survive, their way or our way. And this time, we must see to it that there is no return engagement. For the stakes this time are the greatest men have ever fought for. And what are the stakes? The American stakes. The German stakes, the Bible of the Nazis, the gospel according to Hitler. I'm not going to read all of this, but there are one or two things in this book that will interest you. I quote, "What is denied to us, the German fist must take. If our forefathers had made their decisions by the same pacifist nonsense as the present day does, we would possess but a third of our existing territory." Further, he says, "From time to time, the illustrated papers show how a Negro has become a lawyer, a teacher, perhaps even a minister. It never dawns on the degenerate middle-class America that this is truly a sin against all reason, that it is criminal madness to train a born half-ape until one believes one has made a lawyer of him." This book was written 20 years ago. The plan which it foreshadowed has become a reality.
It was a struggle to get this film approved by the Army brass, who, according to the excellent book Five Came Back, didn't want to unsettle or upset any white troops. But after many revisions, it was completed. It had been criticized by some at the time for being too mild. There's no mention of the fact that the Army was segregated when it was made. But I think that's asking a lot of the U.S. Office of War Information at the time. It was highly praised by many well-known black leaders when it was released and they had screenings for them. what were conditions really like for some African Americans in the South at this time, this film from the Agriculture Department shows a stark reality for some.
The farm, 3 acres of thin, sour land. The household, mind you, they all sleep together on pallets in this little cabin. 12 persons. This primitive home, this big household, this small, tin-soiled farm, these exemplify the conditions in question at their worst.
The national capital at Washington. Breathes there a man with soul so dead, who never to himself has said, "This is my own, my native land." This country has been called the melting pot because by some strange alchemy, a variety of ingredients goes into it, and the result of the bubbling and seething is always the same: a fresh creation, a new citizen, an American.
The Indians, who had resisted the settlement of the new continent from the beginning, had grown bold and powerful while the nation was absorbed in its struggles for the Union.
For some reason, Native Americans in films like this always conduct frontal assaults right into well-entrenched rifles. Gosh, they were foolish.
1862, Congress had approved the plan for a railroad line from Omaha to San Francisco. The construction of this line was marked with many hardships. The Indians quickly realized that the railroad was a pathway by which land-hungry settlers would soon be arriving. It would end their happy hunting ground. They attacked the construction crews at various points along the line.
Under my direction, we're making it clear without hesitation that the soldiers who fought in the Battle of Wounded Knee in 1890 will keep their medals. And we're making it clear that they deserve those medals. This decision is now final, and their place in our nation's history is no longer up for debate. We salute their memory, we honor their service, and we will never forget what they did.
Wounded Knee. The massacre at Wounded Knee. The white man called it a battle. It was a massacre. Fear that the ghost dancers meant to rise against the government brought Chief Bigfoot's band to surrender. Surrendered, hungry, sick. They were being disarmed, then a frightful moment of disturbance, and the nervous, rapid-fire Hotchkiss guns were loosed on all the people. In the morning, Bigfoot, their leader, lay frozen in the snow. The wagon men loaded their bodies and put them in a common grave. And for the old ones, The hoop of the world was broken.
Rebuilding Indian Country from 1933 tries to be sensitive to Native Americans and has many interesting scenes of traditional practices, but the white supremacy is always bubbling up.
There still are to be found Indian dwellings with that sylvan beauty and romantic charm commonly associated with the life of the red man. Generally speaking, however, the Indian housing situation has room for improvement. And through the years, there has been constant change for the better. This row of 7 cabins was built a long time ago for 7 old Indians. Formal houses and Indians are not basically compatible. Before house building can be undertaken, the Indian must be convinced of the superior advantages of the white man's home over the shelters he has found to his liking for so many generations. But the transformation of thought is underway. The new Indian is the Indian in overalls, learning masonry and carpentry and the use of the white man's implements. There must be ample reference to native religious and ceremonial customs, and it comes in the elaborate exhibition dances. While the federal government's policy has worked out through contact with the Indians for more than 200 years, is stated as helping the red man to live his own life and manage his own affairs, it is obvious there always must be influence by the majority of inhabitants in the United States to change the habits and customs of the minority. Such influence is intended to be nothing other than helpful, to raise the Indian's standard of living, to make him happier and more comfortable. Effective tools of helpful change are at work. With the aid of the white man, Indians in the United States now have fine schools in which there is available to the youth of the race education comparable to those attended by white children. Where the concentration of population warrants, there are day schools with modern buses to transport pupils. Also, numerous consolidated schools in which all grades, including high school, are taught. Vocational training as practical preparation for future living is emphasized.
We are losing a value system as distinct people that sets us apart from the industrialized world. These facts surface in our tribal statistics, and no one attempts to do anything about it except for a few social workers and reservation police. This new statistical horror is women and child abuse. Child sexual abuse is epidemic on Indian reservations, and all you hear are whispers. This abuse can be directly attributable to the schools on the reservations. Education in the BIA, public, the contract, and missionary schools do not teach positive values from non-Indian culture, and in collusion with the BIA, certainly do not allow Indian culture and values to be taught. The fact is, educators continually denigrate American Indian traditional lifestyle as primitive, dirty, and without any redeemable virtues. And the tribal councils condone it. Needless to say, every time the U.S. government has interfered with American Indian lifestyles, it has been proven to be disastrous.
What do you know about the American Indian?
Well, I know that one of their words is how. I remember learning about them in grammar school, but very little. And I hope they get what they're fighting for.
Well, you see in the movies where they're catching hell all the time, really. What you read about Geronimo and all this. Besides that, not really too much.
We took the ground and the land away from them when we came here and pushed them out. I don't believe in that.
All I know is I used to get drunk with him. He's not a man that's qualified to be doctors or lawyers. He's an outdoor man, and that should be recognized.
Well, would you believe I'm half Seminole Indian and know very little, unfortunately. I'm ashamed to say.
Not very much, I'm sorry to say.
That they wear feathers. That's really all I know about.
Why white men make up like Indians instead of using Indians in pictures. I think they should get every privilege, every right.
No, I was associated with some Indians in the service, and they were as good as we are, and far better in most cases.
They're beautiful people. That's all I know about them.
Being an Indian is no different than being anything else. The world is made up of different people. This will come to accept this fact. But as far as being an Indian, I don't know whether there's any difference being an Indian or being anything else. I wouldn't know. I've been nothing else since.
We must fight to regain our freedom, or everything is lost. Everything!
Everything is fine. Everything is fine. Everything is fine. Everything is fine. Everything is fine.
When anybody preaches disunity, tries to pit one of us against the other through class warfare, race hatred, or religious intolerance, you know that person seeks to rob us of our freedom and destroy our very lives. And we know what to do about it.
And now, gentlemen, no violence, please. Don't throw those bottles. Don't throw those bottles. No!
Working together to produce an ever greater abundance of material and spiritual values for all. That is the secret of American prosperity.
In an age when we can go to any spot on Earth within a matter of hours, modern transportation may be used to carry understanding and friendship to all nations. Behind the wheel of an automobile, we can swiftly reach any part of the nation. We have broadened our horizons, and the end is not yet in sight. New designs like these cars of the future are waiting to bring distant places more easily within our reach. On an Earth linked together by wide highways, no one of us can live apart. Through the sciences of transportation and communication, we are able to exchange not only our ideas and achievements, but the material treasures of the world as well. International trade makes it possible for the varied products of every land to be enjoyed by all. The contents of your pantry or the materials in your home may come from scores of distant nations. It is within the power of all of us to bring about a better way of life for people of all races and nationalities. Our goal must be mutual trust, mutual understanding, mutual respect, so that our most distant friends will know how to live with us and we with them in one family of nations on this shrinking world.